Our friends, our beloved colleagues live forever in us, as their righteous memories bring us blessing and inspiration. May their memories be followed in friends, our beloved colleagues live forever. I invite you now to say the names of those you hold in your own hearts as you mourn recent deaths. Remember your site, bring your loved one. Let us hold all of them in our hearts as we rise for college. The words are on page 334.
Amen. Amen.
I mean, I always pray in this space, that's not true. It's not often that I get to be a congregant in this space. Wow, do my congregants have a beautiful view or what? So I want to say to all of you who participated and made that such a gorgeous service, thank you. I only cried twice, so that feels like a pretty good job. Considering, I just wanted to introduce you while we're in transition, in case you need friendly faces in the building. In the back of the room, in the red, that's Tessa, our executive director, who helped make this morning possible. And then standing next to her is our volunteer extraordinaire and #1 person in charge of everything. That's Karen Sage. She can also help to direct you. And then you may have met Lori Black, our director of education, on the way in. Feel free to stop them if you need anything. Thank you all again for being here. This was so meaningful.
And Alicia and your team, thank you so much. So good to see you in your natural habitat. This is such a beautiful FEMA and congregation, and thank you to the entire team for all of this. Those of you who are joining us on streaming, we know it's been a rough ride, so thank you for hanging with us. And as we take a deep breath and we recenter ourselves and prepare ourselves to learn, I invite Adrian Scott, who has come in to say a few words before the Judith Abrams Cornell Hub lecture, and to introduce our scholar, who needs no introduction, but will be introduced properly. And as Adrian comes up to FEMA, I'll just reiterate my deep gratitude to the Abrams family, and some of them may be with us, in fact, on streaming, for the funds to be able to make this happen. I know we all really look forward to this deep moment of deep learning. So let's put our target tone away and prepare our hearts and minds for learning. Okay, let's just go to their feet. We are going to take a 5-minute break, and we will reconvene. Thank you to Megan for shoving the Mishkan Tefilah. Thank you. Yes, your congregation for again. And your man, thank you so much. Okay, we are really
like double
counting here. 5 minutes. And at the end of Tefilah today, we're going to take a woman at the wall Talit photo on the FEMA and send it to them.
in shortly.
Which microphone is better for her to be on? Closer together, or do they get happy Shabbat. All of your congregants listen to you and follow all your directions. I see all of you in the lobby. Does everyone have a handout? If you don't have a handout, please raise your hand. Okay. Someone will receive your handout. Can you take in a large breath? Holding it and letting it out slowly. Going to do that one more time. Nice breath in. Holding, letting go slowly.
Thank you for this great honor, Mary, on behalf of all the leadership of WRN. Rabbi Judith Z. Abrams, of blessed memory, used to always ask, "Did you say your bracha today?" before we began every Chavruta study. She was asking about the blessing for Torah study, which for Judy was the most important blessing of all. Judy was a true Talmudic scholar. Not only did she know the text, but she lived the text. Always with a preference for the Yerushalmi, she loved the intricacies and vibrancy of the arguments, the nuance of the ancient Aramaic, and mostly the ability to bring it all alive once again. Judy was a congregational rabbi at a time when it was far from easy to be one of the few women in the congregational world. In Houston, in particular, she faced plenty of obstacles and challenges. Yet through it all, she met her beloved husband Stephen and became a mother to 3 wonderful children, Michael, Ruth, and Hannah. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't reflect on her wisdom, her scholarship, and her mentoring. Judy always wanted to make sure that her students, whether Jewish professionals or lay leaders, had a chance to interpret Talmud according to their own desires. If you got a high five from Judy, it was the equivalent of getting 100% on your most difficult exam. When she wrote something about your comment in pencil on the margin of her book, that was really something. Judy lived by the principle of Torah Lishma. She valued each person's contribution to their own oral Torah. As she balanced her professional and personal lives, Judy was an inspiration to all who were touched by her sacred contributions. In the recent publication by Gila Fine, The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, female voices of the Talmud are further interpreted. One of the most well-known is Ruria. Fine notes, she is the one woman in rabbinic literature described as an actual Torah scholar. The Talmud attaches to her the official activity of the Beit Midrash. Ruria rose to become a wise and learned woman. She had the ability to help resolve conflicts of Jewish law and problems within her own community. She was a leader and a teacher. Ruria shared insights about Judaism that others simply could not or chose not to see. I like to think of Judy inheriting the incredible legacy that Bruria left behind. Judy would often teach that Bruria led a rather tragic life. Thankfully, we are slowly witnessing the shattering of the glass ceiling, and we are raising our children to understand that gender diversity is a cherished part of our progressive and reform movements. A rabbi can be a teacher, a published author, and a wonderful leader. Regardless of gender, sexual orientation, or background, we are all kinds of people. Like Judy, there are published and accomplished female leaders, teachers, and especially scholars. Gathering at the WRN convention this year, we connect with one another and find greater sources of inspiration. B'Shem Omra, Judy, would be so thrilled to know that her work has not been forgotten, but continues to thrive, grow, and expand. For the many Judys, Sarahs, Rivkas, Deborahs, Miriams, and Sallys, and so many countless others, how lucky and fortunate we are to share this space and this sacred time dedicated to learning and expanding our minds. It is now my pleasure to formally introduce our friend, colleague, and teacher, Rabbi Dalia Marks. Dr. Marks is the Rabbi Aaron D. Pankin Professor of Liturgy at HUC-JIR in Jerusalem. She is a much sought-after speaker and teacher, a 10th generation Jerusalemite, and an accomplished author and editor. You can enjoy the breadth of her impressive biography in the convention app. Her latest book, published in Hebrew and English by the CCAR Press, is From Time to Time, Journeys in the Jewish Calendar. It is available for sale and signing afterwards. In learning with Dalia today, we honor and remember many of our beloved teachers, from Judy to Aaron to David Ellenson, who wrote the foreword for this book. Dalia, we are thrilled to learn with you this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy and thrilled to be with you. This is really kind of a dream come true. And thank you so much for everyone who made this event possible. It's not obvious to me that you invited me to speak to you today, and I feel very privileged. I had the privilege also to invite. Not good? Bolan, yeah, I can shout. I had the privilege to have Dr. Rabbi Judy Abrams in my class, in my liturgy class many years ago, so I had a chance to listen to her wisdom, also to read her wisdom. So it's a great privilege to be talking with you today. And today what I would like to share with you, and I think this is the best way to commemorate Judy and to bring her back to our midst, some texts that have to do with women and sacred space in our classical rabbinic sources. It is part of the project that is called FCBT, Feminist Commentary of the Babylonian Talmud, that I took part of, and I wrote a volume in it. I invite you to check this series that I think is very interesting, FCBT, Feminist Commentary of the Babylonian Talmud. I got the smallest 3 track text. I thought it was going to be a very short book, but apparently marginality has its thing. You know, sometimes you find things in places that you didn't expect. So I brought a lot of text. I don't think we're going to complete even half of it. And I'm talking a little bit fast, but if I'm talking too fast, just motion with your hand and I will slow down. So basically what I would like to consider and to think is how women work accessibility to the sacred, to the holiness, to the kedusha. And I think we have, at least I had a very clear conception of how it was in antiquity. And my understanding was that it was a linear progress that led us to this room today. But apparently this is not the case. When you kind of unpack some of our ancient sources, you can find really surprising things that are not so much in line with the way we understand gender and antiquity. And I wanted to share some of these things there with you. So basically, I want to talk about 4 things. Each one of them deserves its own conversation, but I kind of want to go fast through them. But I would be very happy if we have some discussion and comments or questions. All right, so I'm delving in. And I'm inviting us to look between the cracks. And this is some of the things that I found in our classical material, and I think there's more. And I think this is a very promising layer of understanding our ancestry as women, Jewish women. First of all, when we think about the commandment to come to the temple, to make pilgrimage, Aliyah Regel, we have it 3 times in the Torah. And every time it's the same verse, Shalosh Pa'amim B'Shana Yava'eh Kol Zchurcha L'Pnei Adon Adonai. All the male among you shall be saved. This is something that we don't normally see, a commandment that is directed especially toward males. But in this case, that's how it is phrased. However, we do know that women came to Jerusalem. Women partake the Passover meal. Women had their own offerings. There were women Nazarites who took the Nazarite oath. Women were close to the sacred nature of the temple. And we also read we read 2 weeks ago in Tazria about the special offering women had to bring when giving birth. Yeah, that's source number 2. They had to bring special offering to the temple. It's a lot to talk about this passage, but I don't want to talk a lot about it. The only thing that I would like to say is that the Torah tells us that she has to bring a lamb in its first year for burnt offering, and a pigeon sign or turtle dove for a sin offering. So again, this is another question: why sin offering? But we're going to put it aside for a minute. And then the Torah says, if she cannot afford it, if her means is not sufficient for a sheep, she can bring 2 birds. So the Torah acknowledges that maybe women cannot afford to bring, a big offering like a lamb. Maybe they can bring something smaller, and they acknowledge this lack of means in a way. So she can bring 2 birds in what the rabbis call ken, kufnun, a nest. So think about this image of a woman who brings a nest to the temple with 2 birds in it. A nest is like a portable womb, right? So she brings a womb with babies of another mother as an offering, maybe to protect her own baby, maybe to deal with her own experience. This is a very interesting thing here, but it's called a nest. By the way, the first narrative that we have about it is not in the Hebrew Bible or in rabbinic literature. It's from the Christian Bible, right? It's from Brit Hadashah, when the parents of Jesus bring the birds to the temple. And then rabbinic literature deals with this offering of the mother as they always talk about these 2 birds, and they call it ken, nest. And I want to tell you about a situation that happened in Jerusalem one day. We read about it in a place that is not very, I didn't expect to find it there, but I find it very, very interesting. It says the following, I can read the source number 3. It happened once that the prices of nests, this offering, in Jerusalem amounted to golden dinars, dinarei zahav. It was inflation. So women could not maybe afford it. And think about it, the commandment is to come to the temple 3 times a year, but apparently this did not happen unless you live really close by Jerusalem. Making this pilgrimage, leaving your livestock and your fields, and making this very expensive and dangerous trip to Jerusalem was not something you did 3 times a year. So apparently it happened that women had several offerings that she had to bring to the temple because she had several babies. By the way, also miscarriages. Yeah? At the beginning I thought it's so cruel. A woman miscarried and she has to bring an offering. But then I realized it's actually very sensitive to the woman, right? Maybe she doesn't have a living child, but something happened to her. Something happened to her body, something happened to her soul, to her neshama. So that also had to be addressed by offering. So maybe she has to bring 5 offerings. That's a lot of money. And then Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi, who was the head of the Sanhedrin at the generation of the destruction of the temple, he says, Hama'on hazeh, by this temple, which is a war, he's swearing. He's like making, he's swearing by the name of the temple, by the way. It's interesting, right? The well-being of women is the well-being of the temple. It's not, yeah. I shall not rest tonight until I make sure that the nests are sold for silver dinars. I decrease the price. He went into the courthouse and taught, if a woman has 5 definite births or 5 definite cases of genital issues, diva, right? She also had to bring offerings for that. She should bring only 1 offering, and she may then eat of the sacrifices. And the other offerings are not her liability. In other words, if she has to bring multiple offerings, she can bring just 1 offering, and she qualifies. She's okay. She can enter the holy spaces and she can partake the offering meal. And the rest, well, if she wants, if she can bring the rest of the offering, but she doesn't have to. She's not required to. What happened? That very day, the price of nests stood as 2 quarters of a silver dinar. Right? The price went down because the demand, what's the name? The demand and the right? The demand went down, so the price went down. So I just want you to realize my surprise here that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel approves as specific. Everything's okay over there? Approves words of the Torah. Absolutely changes the words of Torah to enable women to come to the temple, to enter the temple. Because when they are ritually impure, they cannot do that. So that's one thing that I wanted to share with you, how the well-being of the women and their accessibility to holiness was an important part of the rabbi's understanding and their willingness to go an extra mile to enable them. But how far did women enter the temple? We know that the temple, I wrote you on the second page a diagram of the second temple, the Herod temple, and it looks like these Russian dolls, right? The further inside you get, the holier the place is. And we indeed read about it explicitly, about the 10 layers or 10 levels of holiness of the temple. We read in Tractate Kelim. I don't think we learned it in school. That's part of the temple business, so we don't often read that. So it talks about 10 layers of impurity, and then it talks about 10 layers of holiness. And it goes from the most further to the most inner place. So Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, is holier than all other lands. And then the next layer, walled cities of the land of Israel, that is Jerusalem, of course, are still holier. And then you see, I'm reading the large points. Within the walls of the Jerusalem, it is still holier, right? The Temple Mount is still holier. For you have to be in a state of ritual purity, right? Purity and impurity in Jewish tradition is not something that has to do with our innate situation. We become impure and pure in a very simple way. It's not something that it means something that if someone had a genital discharge or something like that, they cannot approach the Temple Mount. And as we move forward and inner to the temple, to the holiest place of the temple, less and less people can participate. So first of all, non-Jews cannot enter until from a certain point on. And people who have ritual impurity cannot go further. And then people who Israelites cannot enter and only priests can enter. And then only priests who are ritually pure and have no blemish. This is, of course, for us difficult, right? You know, disabilities, etc. Only non-blemished priest can, Kohanim can enter further point, and then we have one place that only one person can enter only once a year. And of course, it is the high priest, Kohen Gadol, on Yom Kippurim, on a very designated moment. So you see, it's from a place that everyone can enter to a place that only one person can enter in a very specific situation. I imagine masses of people marching into Jerusalem, and then less people can enter Jerusalem, and then less people can enter the Holy Temple, the Temple Mount, and less people, until we remain with one person. Many categories: nationality, physical well-being, caste, priest, Israelites, role, high priest. There's one category that is missing from this list. How further inside could women enter the temple? Doesn't say so. I want you to remember this, because we will get back to it in a second. Someone said the court, the women court. That's what we always have the debate with the Orthodox. And we say, oh, there was always separation of gender. Women were in the women court. But in fact, the women court in the temple is where everything happened. This is where the high priest read from the Torah at the end of Yom Kippur. This is where there was the gathering of Sukkot, the Simcha, the rejoicing of Bet HaShoeva. That was the place where everybody gathered, not necessarily women. How far women could reach? It's a question because they don't say it, and it's a question, why don't they say it? They don't say it because they want to hide something, or because it was so obvious, or because it's not very clear. One thing we know, we're approaching Shavuot, right? When you bring the first fruit, and the rabbis are saying that women also had to bring the first fruit if they owned land, you bring it to the Kohen and place it by the altar. The altar is very much inside the temple. So women could approach? Apparently yes. What about the horrific ritual of the sotah, of the suspect woman, suspect wife? That also happened near the altar. So women could enter, at least in some consideration, very, very further inside. But remember that, because we will get to it. We will get to it in a second. What about gender separation in the temple? I'm moving to the next page, to source number 5. Are we okay so far with questions? Yeah. So we read in Tractate Midot. Tractate Midot has to do with the measures of the temple. How big was this part, how big was that part, what was the architectural relationship between the different parts of the temple. And then it reached the Ezrat Nashim, the women's court. The women's court was 135 cubits long and 35 broad. And then it continues and it brings you some biblical proof text. I didn't cite that. And then it says, "V'chalaka hayta b'rishona." And originally, it has been bare. That is to say, there was one space for all. It was one space. It was not divided. Subsequently, they surrounded it with a balcony. So that women could hold from above, while men from below, so they don't become mixed. That's what we see in Tractate Midot. It tells us that originally there was no separation of gender. It doesn't say it explicitly, but you really can understand it. If they had to build a special balcony for women, it means that before that there was no such thing. And then I brought you the Tosefta, which shows you the gradual evolvement of this, but I will jump right into the Talmud Bavli that describes the process. And the Talmud Bavli says, it is the source number 7, in Tractate Sukkah, because we are talking about something that happened in Sukkot. Our rabbis thought, originally the women were within the women's court, while the men were without. So you can imagine it. We were inside the thing, the men were on the margins. Great. But as this caused light-mindedness, kalut rosh, they didn't take it seriously. There were like all kinds of whatever things naughty things that shouldn't happen inside the temple, they instituted that women sit without while the men were within. They switched sides. Now the women are on the margins and the men are inside. But you see, it was not always like that, according to the Talmud. Did it help? And this, however, exactly still led to like-mindedness, and thus came the last resort. They instituted that women would sit above on the balconies and men below. So they, not just a spatial division, it's also different altitude, exactly. But that was like the last resort. And again, it was very important for them, for women to be present. And this division, and that's my big discussion with some of my Orthodox friends, is it something that took place and then that's what it is? You have a balcony forever? Or is it something that happened only during Sukkot? Because it talks to us, it says it specifically in the whole context that you can check. In the context of the celebration of Sukkot, what happens in Sukkot? It's the festival, ha-ha, right? People are drinking, people are celebrating, who knows what's going to happen. So on that day, and that's source numbers 8, that I'm not going to read now, but you can see later, on that day they felt like they had to have a clearer division between the sexes, between the genders. But normally, I think, they may not have any division between the sexes.
Who was being right-brained, the men or the women now?
Well, so if you say that we do have to read number 8, in a way, and this is very surprising, they did trust women more than they trusted men. Right? The Rav Kahana said in a situation where men are without, in outer compartment, and women were within, there was no fear of seclusion of men and women. In a situation where men are within and women are without, we do fear seclusion. For the Mishnah taught us, and in the Mishnah it says the other way around. Abaye says, now Rav Kahana said, and we teach the other way around, I act strictly on the matter. Abaye said, so they put, partitions of jars and things or canes. So if people move from one side to another, it makes sound and it cannot be. That's not the text that I was looking for. But there were when women have to behave themselves, they trust them. When men have to behave themselves, they don't trust them so much. So that's not the text that I was referring to. But this way or another, what do I take from what we just saw? And of course, we can delve much deeper into it. First of all, it seems that initially there was no gender division at all. Second, when they decided that there has to be gender division, it's not clear if it was something that happened, that took place the entire time, or only during the festival. And third, they were debating how it should be done, how the division should be actually activated. So it's not necessarily, as you see today in some synagogues, more traditional synagogues, that you don't even have a women gallery, or the women gallery is very small, or not so nice, or they realize that at least for some times during the year there has to be a separation. Of course, we would see differently, but I found it very moving that they felt that women should be present. Women should be present. And
there's a question that's going back. Do you anything about it, why it's called the women's court? I think that's why Lisa's always under the impression that that was as far as the women could go. And I haven't studied these, so I sort of just assumed that was always just women, but it's obviously not just women.
your guess is as good as mine. I'm not sure. There's been quite a few theologians that try to answer this. I don't think I have a good answer. Maybe this is what you say. But maybe this is a court that was added in order for women to be present. Yeah, maybe this is the Herod temple that was enlarged and beautified, right? It's not the second temple as it was before Herod recreated it. So he added a place for women to be, but this is where also men were. I want us to remember that the temple was a very exclusive institution, and everybody was excluded. Remember what we just read from everybody was excluded. You could not enter it just like that. It's not like a synagogue. It's not like what we say, this synagogue, the doors of this synagogue are open for everyone at all times. It was a very exclusive place. So in a way, and I'm reaching my conclusion here, everyone was excluded. Men and women are alike. The ones who ran the show were the Kohanim, and to some extent the Levites. Everyone was excluded. As men and women, there was a greater equality between them. By the way, at Second Temple time, we have a surge of women prayers. Many, many prayers written by women, or at least the literature said so. You have the prayers of Judith, and you have the prayers of Susanna, and you have the prayer of Tamar, and the book of Tobias. Women are very praying individuals, and it's taken very seriously. Now what happens next? With the rabbinic times, right? The Mishnah, right? What did we study in school? And all of us studied at HSC. We studied about the great democratic revolution of Chazal, right? Yes? Now we don't need a priest to pray for you. Any adult Jew can stand and pray and lead a prayer and do the worship for everyone, and you don't need someone to do it for you, right? That's true, provided that you're a man. So this great revolution that caused men to be included in a more significant ways actually cut women and excluded women in a much more serious way than it was before. And this is something to remember, because I always thought it was a linear progress. It was not a linear progress. Chazal time was regression. It's a huge regression from a situation that was before. Okay, can I continue? Can I move on? Great. So I think we're going to skip number 9, but I'm sure many of you know this text. This is not so much about women. This is about femininity. And the femininity, the holiness nature, the holy nature of the temple has to do with femininity, or the encounter of the genders together. This is, I think, a very, very beautiful text, but I want to move to the next text that we have here. It's number 10. So let me give you just a quick introduction to this text. It's in the Mishnah, it's in Tractate Kiddushin, and it asks us, how can a man betroth a woman, right? Betrothal, back in the day, has to do with giving something that's worth at least kuta, at least a small amount of money. That's how you betroth a woman, right? It's a very one-way street. A man betroths a woman is being betrothed, not the other way around. But then they start to ponder, can you betroth a woman with a date? And they're like, how big is the date? Okay, how can you betroth a woman? And they come with the question, can you betroth a woman, can a priest, Kohen, betroth a woman with his part of the offerings? Right? Remember, each Kohen, while serving, is eligible to receive a part of the meat. I don't know what happens with the vegetarian. Well, you have a mincha, which is a vegetarian. So, can you betroth a woman with your share of meat? Very romantic, I would say, right? Would you like to be married? Would you like to marry me? Here's a whatever, full kit, whatever. But it's not that simple, because these holy sanctified meat should be consumed within the temple. If you take it out, it's not holy anymore, and it's just a little pool cake. It's not like a whatever. It's not like a real thing. So what do you do? Can you or can you not? And there's a whole debate in the Mishnah that I didn't bring to you. I brought you the discussion in the Talmud, in Tractate Kiddushin. So our rabbis taught, after the death of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda said to his disciple, right? Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda were the same generation, and each one has his school, and apparently they didn't get along very well. Do not let the disciples of Rabbi Meir enter, for they are disputatious, and come not to learn Torah, but to overwhelm you with laws. I think the Hebrew is much better. אל ייכנסו תלמידי רבי מאיר לכאן, מפני שקנטרנים הם. They like to tease me, they like to tease in a bad way, like they like to zet me, they like to, yeah. They don't really come to learn Torah. They come to strike me with their wisdom. I'm sure none of you had this experience. People come to study Torah and they're like, I'm smarter than I heard from this professor, this rabbi said this, I read in that book, just to confront you with whatever it is. So this is what Rabbi Yehuda said to his disciple, but what can we do? Nevertheless, Sumachus pushed his way in and entered. Dachak v'nichnas. This is not a phrase we often find in the Talmud. Dachak v'nichnas. He pushed his way in and entered. Right? So don't let these people enter. But someone entered. What can you do? Once he's in, he's in. You have to deal with him seriously. And he said to them, Rabbi Meir taught me so. If a man betroths a woman with these portions of the offering, whether the higher or lesser sanctity, this is not really for our interest important right now. This does not count as a valid act of betrothal. Is this a legitimate rabbinic approach or not? Of course it is. That's what he learned from his rabbi. This is also, we can also find it in the Mishnah. I should have brought the Mishnah. We can also find it in the Mishnah. This is a rabbinic opinion, a legitimate one. But Rabbi Yehuda does not see it this way. He is very offended. He says, Rabbi Yehuda has become furious with them, with the disciples, and said to them, did I not say to you, let not Rabbi Meir's disciple enter, for they are disputatious, kantranim them, and they come not to study Torah, but to overwhelm me, lekapcheni, with law. By the way, lekapchach is mean to strike. That's like, they don't really want to study, they want to. Can a woman be present in the holy court? I see that I skipped some of the translations, so I translate verbally. So Rabbi Yosef, another rabbi said, people will say, Meir shachad, Yehuda kas, Yosef shachad. People will say, Meir died, Rabbi Meir died. Rabbi Yehuda became furious, and Rabbi Yosef, I didn't say anything, I silent. What will become of the words of Torah? I'm sorry, this part was deleted from somebody. Oh, is it? Okay, so it's Rabbi Yosef. Yeah, so what will be of this damsel in distress, the Torah? Who will protect the words of Torah? That one died, that one cannot confront another opinion. I have to save the day. So he says, he starts pondering. How do I solve this problem of a woman who can only receive that part of the meat inside the temple? And he says, cannot a person accept betrothal for his daughter in the temple court? Or cannot a woman authorize an agent to receive her betrothal payment in the court? And that's the revolutionary. Further, what if she pushes her way in? Yeah? What if he's pondering about this imaginary woman who stands there outside the court and she's like pushing her way in? You're not invited here. That's not your place. Excuse me. But if she's in, she's in. You cannot take her out. Right? If she's in, she's in. Deal with it. Right? And this is once again this phrase that we very rarely see in the Talmud. She pushed her way in. And of course, he doesn't talk about historical case, but he's envisioning or imagining a possibility that the woman will enter the very inner part of the temple, and if she's there, she's there. And you have to deal with it. And I think it's very, very revolutionary. However, Rashi was saying, and to continue, Rabbi Yehuda says, "V'chi isha v'azara minayin." How do we find? Where do we find that a woman can enter the court, right? Where do we find that a woman can be in the court, right? And Rashi says about this: can a woman be present in the temple court? And women do not enter the court, as we learn in the chapter of Avot HaTumot, Kelim 1. That's the text that we just saw before, about the 10 levels of Kedusha. So our greatest commentator of the Torah and of the Talmud, Rashi, remembered the separation of gender in this text. It is not there. However, it was so clear to him that women cannot approach the holy places of the temple that he remembered it somehow. Although it's not in the text. I find it amazing. Rashi never makes such mistakes. But if you think about his time, I don't know if you had a chance to visit his synagogue in Worms. The women prayed not in a women gallery, they had a whole different building for themselves. So he was looking at his time and reflecting on the temple situation. Now his grandson, Rabbeinu Tam, right? Remember Rashi had two, maybe three, but probably 2 daughters. Who laid Tefilah, probably they were very smart. They didn't have any access to the Beit Midrash, but they raised some very smart rabbis. One of them is Rabbeinu Tam. And Rabbeinu Tam, we see it in the Tosfot for Kiddushin. And they say the following, you see 10b? The Kuntras, this is how they call the Rashi commentary. The Kuntras explain that a woman may not enter the court, as we learned in the first chapter of Kelim, that's the text that we saw, the 10 levels of holiness. But this is not correct. Right? The grandson is criticizing the grandfather for not being correct. It's not true. For we do not find anywhere that women are prohibited from entering the court. Yeah? So look how this story evolved. 1,000 years later, a grandfather and a grandson disagreeing on how should we read the text. Rashi mentions that women cannot be there, and his grandson says, actually, this is not true. He never said so. So I find it very interesting what is in the text, what is not in the text, what was the reality, and how we understand it from generations to come. Yeah, I think this is a very good example. And it seems to me that many of us, many of the pioneers of the women rabbis in our midst, I don't think I'm one of them, but I'm like maybe the second or third generation to these very, very courageous women. That's exactly what they did. They pushed their way inside. They were not invited. We heard from Sally yesterday about all the things she had to go through. They didn't wait to be invited. They didn't wait for the ceiling glass to be shattered. They just pushed their way. And I think all of us have to be thankful for these very, very wonderful, courageous women that opened this path for us. We still have a long way to go, but at least we're in it. We're in the story. We have the possibility, we have the legitimacy to write ourselves in the text. Not only for the future, but also reflecting on our past. Healing our past, rereading our past, understanding that our past was not so black and white as we were led to believe. There were many subversive voices. We heard about Ruria, right? There were many subversive voices within our literature that showed us that the separation between the genders was not so clear-cut and strong. So this is basically what I wanted to share with you, but I'm sure if someone wants to say something, to add, to ask, please.
Hi, that was fabulous. So around this time in early Christianity, they're disassociating from Judaism because they don't want to seem beholden to Judaism. Early Christianity talked about Jesus being Jewish more, but as time moved on, they said, no, the Jews are different. So in that same lens, what was the impetus for the ones who, what was the impetus to change the understanding of what women were going to be in these spaces? Were there threats from women? Were women getting too powerful? Like, what was behind the scenes going on that led to this transition in the text?
So, if I understand you correctly, you asked what led to the transition of the separation in the text between ancient Judaism and ancient
And
Judaism.
what was going on that the men felt, or whoever did this needed to clarify the women were going to be in a separate place, even though they weren't originally?
The answer is, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. And the question is, they don't write about it because it's not interesting, or they don't write about it because they don't want to write about it. And you can kind of see the reality between the cracks. Yes? I don't know. Early Christianity, of course, was different. By the way, Jesus' time, as you said, they did not see themselves as Christians. Jesus did not know he's Christian. And you have the story of Mary Magdalene. There are great similarities, actually wrote about it, the great similarities between Mary Magdalene and Veruria. Two wise women who received revelation. Veruria, wisdom, and Mary, the Holy Ghost, she was the first one who saw Jesus after he came back to life. And then both traditions, the Jewish and the Christian, trashed these women. Right? Veruria is what we just heard, that she had the love affair with a disciple of her husband, whatever. It's a very much later story. And Mary, that she was a prostitute.
And it's also Rashi, okay? I'm actually very angry at Rashi.
Be compassionate. True, that was also in Rashi, but in Christianity,
Rashi made this up.
I don't know if he made it up. This was a tradition that came to us first in Rashi, but maybe it was older, I don't know. But with Mary, it's very clear. Where did we find that she was a prostitute? Never it said so. But it seems like the church could not handle the fact that it was a woman who saw Jesus. She was the first one. She was the one who showed him or told the other disciples. She was the disciple of all disciples of Jesus. And they could not ascribe that to her, so they trashed her.
Is there any way to go back and re-examine other sources to figure out what was going on that?
So that's what we try to do. I think this is our task, to try to understand what was going on, knowing that we will never really understand. And there was probably multi-layered and multifaceted situations. But I think the comparison to early Christianity is very helpful, right? On one hand, we see women present with Jesus, Martha and the different Miriams and all that. But on the other hand, Paul says women should be silent. Yeah, so there too, it's more than one clear answer. Yes, please.
I have a question and then.
No, I have to see.
Two questions. One, in 8, what is seclusion mean to fear? And then I'm just thinking like sociologically, how when women like Sally and all of us have pushed our way into leadership, how the attendance of the men has diminished at services. And not in the synagogue, but on the churches. I mean, there's just less attendance in there.
The men's flight.
Right, men's like, and whether that's what they're afraid of looking like.
I don't think this is what the Kiddushin here reflects. And if women are more present, then men will take one step back. I think this is something that we have to take care of. This is something that we have to think about. I honestly think, as a feminist and all, I think it's great, the situation, but we also have to make sure that everyone is feeling welcome in the synagogue, not just women, right? It's yichud, being together in an appropriate way. So this is of course something that is the question that you ask is a question that we all need to ask ourselves. If we want the walls of the synagogue to be, or the gate of the synagogue to be open for everyone, how our inclusivity does not become an exclusivity to other people. So that's a task. That's a task that we have. So again, just to sum up, the temple was a very exclusive institution. But within this exclusiveness, the exclusive nature of the temple, there was a greater equality, I would suggest, between the gender. And the democratic revolution of Chazal made it much more democratic for men, but it pushed women aside. So this is something that maybe we have to strive to in the second temple time. We have to finish now. Tam velo nishlam, or as the last words in the text, the idach tili. Now we should go and study, because those who studied know that these are always the concluding words of my syllabus. Now we have to go and study. And it's been great to be with you. It is great to be with you. We at HUC, we feel that we have to be a resource for all of you in the field. This is how I personally feel. It's very relevant to also you're welcome to visit my website. You have the address down there. A lot of it is in English, but there's some in English too. Our HUC podcast that is called Kanfei Ruach, Wings of Prayer. It has to do with the synagogue. Actually, with the liturgy, actually the last episode is about the synagogue, and we talked about some of these things. And it's really heartwarming to hear from so many of you that you use my book, that you take it to bar mitzvah classes, introduction to Judaism, adult bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah classes. And I'm very, very happy to be with you and to be a resource for you in anything that you may need now or in the future. Toda rabah.
We want to thank our dear colleague, Dahlia Marks, for